everybody. It is Friday, and again, we are here with another edition of the Culture Marketing Show. And we have a treat for you today. Today, we have Vanessa Shaw with us. She is an expert in crafting culture, and we're going to talk a little bit about communities, creating communities in and outside of the workplace, and getting people that sense of support around them. But Vanessa, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you part of the Culture Marketing Show.
Yeah, great to be here. Oh man, so it's really hard to narrow down the moment that I knew that my career would be all about culture. So I'll give a synopsis that's quick and short for our listeners here. You know, I got the travel bug when I studied abroad in London, and that experience of being in a different country culture really opened me up to bigger learning about myself and the world. And then from there, it just continued. And I worked a lot with global organizations. I worked in nonprofit, doing international volunteer program management. And now I find myself back home in the Bay Area after about 10 years bouncing around the world. I lived in 3 different countries and 8 different cities over the course of my 20s. And yeah, I didn't, nobody ever thought I'd come back home and settle down, but I have.
I love it.
I guess getting to your 30s, it gets to the best of all of us. But yeah, so now I run my own company called Human Side of Tech, and my focus is really about mobilizing a community of culture builders and empowering them with the leadership skills so that they have the confidence and courage to really move our organizations and our company cultures towards a better future. So that's what I spend most of my day thinking about and working on, and it's an incredible time to be in the workforce right now.
Oh, I love it. In fact, so one thing I want to talk about today is we're going to leverage your expertise. It's, we get a lot of people talking about different subject matters. We're talking about, recruiting and the impact of company culture when you're recruiting, and the transparency you need to have so they know exactly what they're getting themselves into when they come into work at a company. Makes that shock factor a little bit less. We've talked about a number of different things, but today we're going to talk a little bit about creating a culture of feedback. And the reason that we were so excited about this topic is looking at Gallup and a number of other organizations that are reporting on why people quit. There's such right now in our market, our landscape, the labor market is super tight. And so we need to protect the current labor force as much as possible. We know culture has a tremendous impact at retaining those A players and those great employees at our organization. But what we forget to talk about is it's not about perks. It's not about just the free lunch or the really cool incentive trips that the company put together, but it's really about the relationship between the employee and their direct level supervisor and their manager. And a lot of the time, that friction that drives them to leave their organization is due to a lack of feedback, a lack of transparency and understanding of really kind of what they're supposed to be working on at that time. And that creates the tension, the building blocks of frustration, and those frustration leads to accepting other opportunities. So we'd love to talk with you a little bit about what does that mean to you, a culture of feedback inside an organization. You work with some tremendous organizations, some great tech companies. How do you do that? How do you create a sense of feedback inside the walls of the organization?
Yeah, so when I thought deep down about what's the point of my work and my career, I kept on coming back to this word, that being courageous. And that really ties into feedback, because to deliver feedback to somebody, I myself need to be courageous, reckon with difficult feelings, and also in order to receive feedback and take it in, takes a piece of courage from all of us. And I think that a culture of feedback is something we can create anywhere. You can create it in an interpersonal relationship with a good friend of yours where you say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Or I want to help you grow and hold the mirror up for you. But that's really delicate. And inside our organizations, it's also that way. And I'll share an example. I was just speaking with somebody at VIVAHR yesterday, and if you're not familiar with VIVAHR, it's a great tool to help schedule out your social media and tweets.
Yes.
Yeah, but so it also is really known in the market for its transparent culture and how they've really worked intentionally to be very transparent. Their salaries are visible on their website. They have a blog that talks all about their experiments internally to create a good culture. And also, VIVAHR is also a 100% remote team. They have no main office. Everyone works remotely. And so what they were talking about is something that happened early on at VIVAHR. They had decided, well, our culture is to default to transparent. And so when we are giving feedback, we give recognition. Okay? But why not also give constructive feedback in a transparent way? So they started doing that. And not surprisingly, nobody felt very good about having constructive or difficult feedback done in a public way. It felt too vulnerable, and so they immediately changed that approach and moved to doing only the positive recognition publicly and the constructive work, what you need to work on feedback in one-on-ones or in private environments with your team lead. And so this is just one example of how creating a culture of feedback is an area people are experimenting, and there's still not necessarily a guidebook that will say this is the best way to do it or not. It's a lot of trial and error, and it also is uncomfortable for people because when you get it wrong, getting feedback wrong is rather upsetting most of the time, and we can all really improve our skill set on that. And I have a few ideas of how that is, what that's looking like now in companies that are doing it well, but yeah, I mean, so that's just one example of how feedback is an important piece, but not so much something we all know how to do yet.
Tremendous input there. I think, a big part of what you're saying is we're a little bit scared to give feedback, or fear of offending someone, and I think that sometimes gets in the way of creating a full, transparent experience. And I'm probably the same way. I don't want my feedback aired out to my peers, right? If it's something that I need to work on constructively, I'm willing to accept that and create a sense of humility and work through that. And so much of culture is about trust. And if I feel like
maybe she did. I haven't looked.
Trust by talking about my negative side of my workload publicly, it feels like there's a sense of trust that's being, I don't know, I think that would be a really interesting dynamic to look at is when creating a culture of feedback and really creating that positivity and that directional, whether positive feedback or negative feedback, how do we create trust along the way? Do you have any thoughts on that, on creating like a trustworthy environment so that is, if I'm sitting down in front of my manager and he's giving me some feedback that's really hard to hear, how do I get a sense of trust that he's still confident in my performance so that I can leave the meeting being ready to celebrate becoming a better employee and executing on the feedback points that he gave?
Yeah, so I recently just had an incident 2 weeks ago where somebody showed up in not a very warm way. They were a bit rough and around the edges and a bit rude and very direct, and it caused a stir with the people that were in the room. And they came in and they told they needed the conference room. We all had to get up and leave, and it was a bit unpleasant. So it definitely broke some feeling of safety and trust and some bad vibes, if you will. And ultimately, I knew that this person was under a lot of pressure. I knew they had a lot going on, and they knew that there was some stressful things coming at them that week. And so in my head, the first thing that came to mind was, we're all learning. We're all learning how to be human. We're all learning. Exactly, right? So for me, that's how I create a sense of trust and safety in any kind of situation that's unpleasant or has the potential to be uncomfortable. So that's using the word, we are all learning. It levels the playing field. It says, we're a we, right? You giving feedback, me receiving feedback. We're in this together. It's a we. We both have a role here. And we're both doing things that we will learn along the way. And maybe we learned that was a great way, that was uncomfortable. So creating safety and trust to me is also putting us in the position of we're all learners, and using that language has really served. And speaking from my own humility, saying, I'm learning too. is there a way that I can best serve you? Is there a way that I can best deliver feedback? Help me understand what my growth opportunity is in this. Because just like anybody who's had to give difficult feedback, as in the extreme, perhaps telling somebody that they've been terminated from their role. That's kind of the extreme end of the spectrum of feedback delivery. And anyone that's ever had to terminate someone knows how difficult it is to be in both seats, that the person receiving that news as well as the person who's delivering it. And there's a learning opportunity for both. And so I think having that opportunity to position take, so empathizing what your position is and you vice versa empathizing with mine. It's not always easy to do, absolutely. But that's how I look at creating safety, creating trust, is through stepping into that we're in this together, we each play a role, and we're both learning along the way. So let's be gentle to each other if we don't get it totally right.
I love that. I think a lot of us, well, it depends, I guess, on the leadership experience and kind of our approach to it, but sometimes we can be a little bit candid and we forget the importance. I love the word safety in there. And a big part of creating a dynamic of trust is people need to feel safe. They need to feel like that their opinions are safe, that they're, when they're being vulnerable with their manager and they're opening up about maybe some personal things going on, they need to feel safe in that environment, that it's not going to come back to bite them. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know we really celebrate, and well, not celebrate, we talk a lot about feedback in the context of negative feedback, right? How do we get feedback to construct a situation? What about a culture of positive feedback? What's the balance there? And is that something that needs to be consciously crafted along the way? What are your thoughts on like regularity and consistency of creating a feedback, a positive feedback environment?
Yeah, so culture is by default or by intention. So culture always is going to exist. If it's by default, you have less say in how it is. So whether it's encouraging feedback, positive-oriented feedback to constructive, you need to create rituals around both so that it's just part of the normal heartbeat of your company or of your culture or your team or even your relationship. I mean, I think about this as practice in our workplaces. It's practice in our personal relationships with a spouse or a best friend. Having those regular heartbeat moments of when you check in about anything needed to be said or anything needed to be recognized, right? So it can look almost the same way in many instances. And I had a partnership for a while that we were doing a project together. And so there was lots of tactical things that had to get done, to-do lists, and very execute. But a partnership is also the interpersonal side. And so the way we designed our relationship was that on every 1 hour call where we would check in on the updates of each of our contributions, we saved the last 10 minutes of the call as we could drop off at that point, or we could share any uncomfortable feelings, concerns, constructive feedback. And then also, if there was nothing to, in that regard, we could also give some appreciation and recognition time. So it was always the same 10 minutes that we knew it was there. So if there was something bubbling up for me that I was like, man, Ryan, I really need to have a conversation with you. Yeah. I don't have to reach out and say, can we set up a call to give you some feedback? Because immediately you're going to say, uh-oh, what's wrong? So I created that heartbeat check-in point in the structure, the design of our culture in that relationship. And it really opened up the opportunity to have regular feedback of whatever kind and gave the space for both the recognition and appreciation and the constructive pieces. But just to answer the other side of the question that you asked around it, where are the boundaries? So many times things need to be kept in balance with each other. If there's too much focus on just the positive, you're not giving that constructive growth feedback. To me, when it's difficult to hear, it's oriented towards helping you grow. Whereas positive feedback helps you grow, but it is more of a sustaining energy, keeps you feeling good so that you're also ready to receive that growth feedback. And I'm sure you've heard there's a great book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. She has a framework where she looked at different types of feedback, and being too candid or too sweet and soft around the edges, neither one served a great result. And so what she called what it was radical candor, where it's candid, but it's also thoughtfully constructed in a way that you can understand how to implement the feedback, and it helps you truly move forward and propel your own growth as well as the person delivering it. So it's a great book to check out to get a really easy toolkit on how to bring that into your conversations at work.
Oh, that's great. We'll add that to the show notes here. Tell me, I think it'd probably be pretty easy to create those micro release points, but a lot of us fail to do it. And instead, what happens is that tension starts building and compounding and getting stronger and stronger until, boom, there's an explosion inside the office, or the lack of explosion, and they just leave and they never come back, right? They just build up, and it's an external thing. Tell me a little bit about creating. I love from the meeting cycle, allowing people to just, if it's on their minds, get it out. But are there other tools that maybe we haven't thought of, or just something as simple as creating a Slack channel or what kind of environment can you create where people can feel comfortable just to say, I just got to get this out a little bit. And I guess bear in mind, we don't want to create a culture of complaining either, but how do you get that out so people feel like they can give feedback, they can receive feedback without it turning into a culture of complaining?
Yeah. So I think the role of leadership is to create the conditions for the environment, but ultimately it boils down to individual leadership too. My own personal approach. So any person working in HR has sent out an engagement survey and seen great feedback that's useful for them, and then just whining and complaining where, I don't like the chocolate chip cookies, I wish we would have oatmeal cookies, and silly things like that. That's really not what they want to spend their time looking at. And so there's always going to be some of that, and it really is going to be down to individuals and how you take what's useful, leave the rest behind. And so feedback, it comes in many different forms. Right now we're talking a lot about growth-oriented, team leader plus their team. But feedback comes in an organization through engagement software surveys too, right? That's feedback for leadership of how the employees are feeling about things. So it's more anonymous. Then there's that direct in-person. A Slack channel for constructive feedback, I would lean away from. That's more public. That's not the best environment. Perhaps recognition feedback can be great in a Slack channel. Although you do want to also consider that some people are a bit shy and they prefer not to be put up on a visible platform, especially different cultures. When I've lived in Europe, I knew people in some of the Nordic regions of Europe would be horrified to be publicly put out there, to be recognized and stand alone. They're very group-oriented. So you want to be sensitive to different styles. And again, that is going to be where a leadership opportunity comes in of, are you asking? Do you say, how do you want to be recognized and appreciated? An email, a phone call, a card, a post in Slack, get to stand up and tell everybody at the next meeting. So it's really important to consider different styles and give space for all of that. That's another piece of what creating an inclusive culture looks like, designing for difference. And then also having self-awareness where I can personally say, I feel more comfortable with XYZ. So sometimes it's about knowing to ask, and if it's not being asked, it's knowing to speak up and have that courage to put out into the office or in your team that this is something we should talk about. So sometimes culture can change just by the movement of one person who steps up. And so I always encourage everyone that sure, culture starts at the top, but it also comes from the bottom up as well. We all can influence culture, even when it's just a single person. You're still one person on a team. If your team's 10 people, that's 10%. We can make 10% change every day. That's a big overall impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our viewers here. I'm not putting on the spot here for this second. It'll be fun. A lot of our viewers here today are customers of VIVAHR, and a lot of our users are people between 50s and maybe 300 employees. There's 1 to maybe 2 or 3 HR people inside the organization. Or on the smaller end, they're just departmental managers that are in charge of kind of being their own HR, role along the way. They're wearing multiple hats. Do you have a couple, 2 or 3 tips or recommendations real quickly that they could implement today and start rolling out and creating a culture of feedback, of positive feedback, negative feedback, but more importantly is establishing that sense of safety and trust that feedback is coming from the heart. Have any couple tips on how to start today or how to approach that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I saw actually at IDEO, if you're familiar with that as an organization, they're really creative and they do regular questions in the bathroom. Now, stick with me on this because I'll see how it makes sense. So when you first introduce something, you don't want to do it too aggressively or too publicly. You kind of have to warm people up to an idea. So you want to start with something that's less aggressive. So they put up questions and things in the bathroom, and there's post-it notes, and you can add your commentary. And so it's just a fun, playful thing to have more dialogue and feedback and sharing. Are you a dog or a cat person? You might ask, and you have people post it up. So it seems really trite and silly, but then you can build off of that and then make the questions a little bit more personal. And another really great way to do feedback, I use this a lot with my workshops and at events. You could also do it at an offsite or if you have a longer meeting, is you just take 3 post-it notes. You make a smiley face, put it in the middle, and a sad face down at the bottom. You put it on the door or on a wall, and you give everyone post-its, and at a certain point, you ask them to write down a few things that have stood out to them at the meeting or things they're thinking about. And anything can come up. I've seen anything from a sad face because the air conditioning's too strong to a happy face that I'm feeling connected as a team and with my leadership. So feedback can come in small ways, and I always encourage people that to create a culture of feedback or to create any new initiative, start small. People get really enthusiastic. Look at what Google's doing or Facebook, and they say, we're going to bring in a Google Life feedback, a culture of feedback, and they're a small 50-person startup. And it's like, that's not the right angle. So start really, that's why I like to go through the analog approach with post-its and sticky notes. Or like you said, if you have an internal team communication tool like Slack or VIVAHR, you can also start a little feedback recognition channel and let people show up there and see what comes up and get inspired by what voices come in through those channels. So if you're just one person, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with a really large, hard to manage program at the first thing. You want to start thinking, what's important to our company and our team? So this is taking kind of a design thinking approach, right? Where the first step in design thinking is to empathize with your users. So for HR, their users are the employee. So learning to listen and empathize and doing small little experiments to grow a better understanding of what their needs are on feedback is where I would tell them to do. And going into it knowing that there's a lot of unknowns. So getting that curiosity of, I'm a learner here. I want to learn about what they need. I want to watch. I want to observe. Think of it like if you were to travel to a new country for the first time and you're looking for clues and signals of how to behave the right way, how to order a cup of coffee, take that look, fresh eyes at your organization and look at it like a new place you're visiting for the first time and what clues can come from there. And then from that is where you would come up with your own little experiments.
I love that. So many great nuggets in there. But my favorite one is empathy. And I think that creating a culture of empathetic feedback can go long ways. And how do you get yourself to their same level, understand their environment, external, internal, whatever's going on. So when your feedback, it's coming across as truly authentic and learning. I'm trying to really understand the situation so we can work through this together. I love all those points. Fantastic. Okay, rapid fire, a couple questions for you. We do this every time. You ready?
Okay.
No warning on this one. It's coming. Favorite movie you've recently seen?
Recently seen?
Yeah.
I saw The Florida Project.
Okay. Music. A recent album you either like downloaded or purchased?
They're called The Session, and they're a local band. S-E-S-H-E-N, Session. They're amazing.
Shout out to local bands. I love it. That's
yeah.
exciting for us. Okay. Now, where do you see the people side of business in the next 5 to 10 years? If you were to say, here's my spotlight into the future, what's changing? If anything changes, what's going to really make the biggest impact to the people side of business in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we're going to have to learn how to get a lot better at understanding bots and robots and AI. And I believe in the power of technology to make the human experience better. But it's the Spider-Man quote of, with great power comes great responsibility. And so I see that we're all going to be a lot more tech savvy in the people space and taking different pieces off of our plates that we're not good at and allocating those outwards. And then we'll get to do more of the things we're really good at, which I see as being the community building skill set and relating through empathy and storytelling. So I think our storytelling, community, and empathy skills will go up as the robots take off some of the workload from us.
Wow, great insight. Okay, how do we get in touch with you? If there's some folks watching this, they're like, hey, we need to touch base with Vanessa. We need to bug her a little bit about where to find that local band. How do they do that?
So I am on all these networks, Twitter, Facebook. My website is all humansideoftech.co, not .com, .co, and Twitter, Human Side of Tech. And on LinkedIn, Vanessa Shaw. I'm the blonde one. There's a redheaded Vanessa Shaw. That's not me. She seems great, but we're different people.
Awesome. Well, we'll put some of those links in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, all our viewers are able to watch, learn a little bit more. My biggest takeaway is empathetic feedback. And there's a way to do that in which shows a sense of trust and compassion along the way. Love it. Again, always, every Friday live, we have the Culture Marketing Show. We'll see you next time. Hey, everybody. It is Friday, and we are here for another episode of the Culture